I'm not. Good morning. Welcome to SJU. Hope you're doing good today. We're talking about the things that we refuse to do. And then we have some news around Marvel. There's Marvel news. There's some...
What?
Yeah, I know.
On this show?
We would never... Dan, normally we would only be talking about the economy, as you know. But today we're actually going to talk about Marvel just to mix it up. Dan Murrell.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna move.
Really dickish of
We're
me.
gonna move away from the hard-hitting news that we normally do. I remember Billy the business is here, and I'm
Is this a roast all of a sudden?
I'm sorry,
the business
Billy.
is here in the crowd
worked
today.
very hard on the show, and I just swooped in. And I'm
just
being a
gonna-
total.
with your
God damn it.
Mark Wahlberg,
You know,
kind of happening accent.
I already got to take off my
fear.
jacket.
Yeah, it's the Mr. Rogers.
We're getting comfortable. I do remember, you know what, I was going to tell a story and I'm not going to do it because I'm going to stay on target. Mandalorian news coming up.
Well, what do you think? Get well soon, Joe and Spencer, and everyone else in our
Charlie and the
Literally.
Chocolate Factory
I know.
around here. There's three of us left.
Yeah, it's 10 little Indians.
Or like even the people that come on the
Agatha
show,
Christie novel.
like are getting sick. Like Ed
Yeah.
was sick last week.
Yeah.
It's like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Emma was supposed to be on Movie Fights, sick.
She got
Ed,
sick. Ed's
Yeah.
sick.
Yeah.
What we are calling the Cthulhu, the Cthulhu.
Cthulhu,
The
yes.
Cthulhu is attacking everyone. Our Lord Cthulhu has seen fit to make us each drown one by one.
You know who was patient zero? JT freaking E.
That's-
Everyone was
that's
blaming
accurate.
me. It's JTE was
Yeah.
patient zero.
He was.
He was the first one to be
You were
stricken.
the first one.
Yeah, that's true.
And now we just start passing around like a hot potato.
And what's his punishment? His like 8th Super Bowl win.
Yeah.
So just goes to show you.
Yeah.
What are we talking
Well,
about today?
God, this is our show, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now that you're all caught up on the flu, the Cthulhu, and we've managed to deprecate ourselves at least 5 times in the first 2 minutes and our general lives, I think we're ready to talk about Taika Waititi.
Let's do it.
Taika Waititi won't do Guardians 3. What? Yeah, you kind of knew that. But a lot of people, he's the person that a lot of people have suggested if anyone takes over for James Gunn, then Taika's a good fit. And certainly understandably so, because frankly, Thor Ragnarok felt a lot like Guardians, tonally speaking. That said, he's not into it. So here's what he said. He was at the TCAs. I don't know if you guys know what TCAs is, but I'll explain it to you. It's the Television Critics Association, a thing I used to have to go to twice a year.
They know from my William H. Macy story.
Oh,
what
right, about the
TCAs
farting.
are. Yeah.
Well, it's the guy at the table who hasn't been there, Roth. Please
All right.
enlighten me on what the TCA is.
Well, for those of us who haven't farted in front of William
Yeah,
H.
exactly.
Macy, I'll
It's a
let
very
us
exclusive club that I am a proud card-carrying member.
I'll tell you a little bit about the TCAs. Television Critics Association meets twice a year, and basically it's in one of 2 hotels in Los Angeles, and there's a massive ballroom, and it's for about it's about a week actually, but the days that really matter are only like 3.
It's like HBO days.
Yeah, it's
are
like the
big
HBO
long.
day
Yeah.
that you care about. So you go, and it used to be, interestingly enough, years ago, people like the Netflix day didn't matter, and obviously that's changed quite a little
Can
bit.
I derail
since
you
then.
for just a second to say that
If you want to derail my derailment, I
on
invite
HBO
you to.
Day, no joke, HBO Day, they came and were like, hey, we have Sean Bean and Peter Dinklage here for this fantasy show coming out, Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
We're like, pass.
Pass, hard
We're
pass.
never going to use it.
Yeah.
Oops.
I have so many stories of like the oopsie hard pass of like you just didn't know that that was going to be the thing to blow up. But yeah, so basically it's set up. There's a massive ballroom where you sit down and there's a stage where each of the shows come out and they have a panel and they kind of tout what's coming up for the season, or if it's a new show, they have a panel, and then you splinter off and there are either video or print interviews that you do with individuals from the shows.
This is where the head of FX yesterday openly went to war with Netflix.
Correct.
Yeah, it was just
Exactly.
like, it's garbage.
Yeah, yeah. It is.
Which bold strategy.
Bold
Cotton.
strategy. Well, especially considering, but you could understand why the head of FX would say that considering who now owns FX.
Yes.
So just to clarify that, Disney now owns, soon to be official, owns Fox, which of course owns FX, and FX will likely be part of the Disney strategy. I'm hoping they'll sort of leave it alone, and if anything, gear it more towards Hulu or wherever they want to place their adult-themed material, because FX does great work.
One would hope.
One would hope. All of that to say, oh boy, this is a rough show. I hope you're enjoying this education about
But no,
the TCAs.
this is going to come back later.
It's
because
coming
we have
back.
TCAs
It's
at
coming
the
back.
end.
It's coming back.
Yeah.
So
You always show in the first act the gun
yeah.
that's going to be used in the thing.
yeah,
This is Chekhov's
this is
TCAs.
Chekhov's. Damn it! I was so close, and you just got there
Sorry.
first. Oh, Chekhov's TCAs. So TCAs, to Dan's point, the heads of the network will also come out and answer questions and say things that we write about in the news. So, and there's also a fun thing called a scrum. And if you guys don't know what a scrum is, yeah, would you like to know?
I know what I think a scrum is.
Well, tell me what you think it is.
I know it is. It's a sporting term. It's when there's just a ball in the middle of the field and everyone's trying to jump and get that ball.
Okay, it's exactly that, but J.J. Abrams is the ball, and the players are reporters with microphones.
Oh, okay,
So
that
it's
sounds about
basically
right.
after the panel ends, you rush up to the stage, and literally, if you're me and Terry Schwartz, who now works at IGN, follow J.J. down a hallway because you're getting that goddamn quote.
Sounds like a great system.
So it's and then they feed you stuff and they give you presents, and
It's
like.
not a joke. Yeah.
Not
you
a
get some
joke.
Cool, you get
Like,
some cool stuff.
You get some really cool stuff. Like HBO does these massive giveaway bags. They send you stuff to your house. But in the midst of all this, the Television Critics Association is kind of old school. I am so sorry, but here we go. It's kind of old school, and so you are not allowed to clap. Like, if someone comes out and does a panel or announces something that you as a fan of things might enjoy, as a critic, and in order to maintain your integrity as a critic and a member of the Television Critics Association, you are not allowed to act like this is a fan con event. This is where, and they do ask the hard questions. They do not shy away from anything. It's some very awkward moments occur at this event.
There's some weird Dexter questions that year. I was like,
I feel
boy.
awkward. I feel awkward. They will ask. They will really, really, really challenge the networks and really, really challenge the showrunners. So that's the TCAs. We're 15 minutes in, and here we go with the first story. Taika Waititi at the TCAs was there basically to talk about The Mandalorian, which we'll also talk
Actually,
about.
he was there to talk about What We Do in the Shadows. Is
Oh, What
gonna
We
be
Do
a
in the
show.
Shadows.
Oh,
Sorry, that new
yeah.
show. And he did address both Marvel in terms of would he do Guardians 3 and The Mandalorian, but this is what he said. I want to do another movie with them, meaning Marvel. For me, those are James's films. Going into something like that with his stamp all over his films would be like going into someone's house and saying, hey, I'm your new dad, and this is how we make peanut butter sandwiches now. I feel kind of awkward. However, I'm still hanging out with those guys and talking about new stuff. So meaning those guys, I guess, is Kevin Feige. Fun for you, Taika.
Yeah.
That's like a fun Super Bowl event at Kevin
Hanging out.
Feige's house, hanging out, talking about the next Thor movie, I imagine.
Maybe.
Something. I mean, this comes as not a huge surprise. Chris Pratt also said to Variety, I promise that there will be a third movie. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I know everyone on board is just as eager to give the fans what they want and wrap up a trilogy in a meaningful way. Now that we have learned all about the TCAs, Dan, what do you think about Guardians?
I mean, I guess he was sort of the fan choice to take
Yeah.
over, and it seemed to make the most sense. But also, he's very, like, I get because Thor was very cosmic and out there that people are like, oh yeah, Taika Waititi, but like he's not the guy to come in and like, I agree, imitate someone else's style. Like he's very singular, and who would want that job? Secondly, like who in the world would want the task of like, oh, I'm going to do the third Guardians movie, you know, the one that was like very distinctly a pet project of a director who crushed it and then was fired, you know, like in this crazy thing that people are still talking about. And oh, by the way, no pressure, but you have to nail the end of the trilogy. Yeah, sign me up. Like,
Yeah.
who want to do? It's like,
It's a
who want to do
no-win.
that? It's
Yeah.
a no-win scenario. Like, best case, people are going to come out saying like, "You really did as good as James Gunn did."
Yeah.
That's best case. That's the best case scenario. Is that they're going to say you did as good as another filmmaker. Like, I don't blame him. Like, even if it doesn't seem like the kind of job he would want, obviously, as he said, but like, who would take it? I wouldn't want that job.
Nobody should want that job. And I think the only person the people or persons that will end up taking it are going to be emerging filmmakers for whom this is just too much of an opportunity to pass up on, is my guess. What do you think? Or they'll go the Ron Howard. And be like, I don't mean literally, don't yell at me. I don't mean literally Ron Howard. I just mean like an old school person. But I don't see Marvel doing that.
I think you can do that. Not in the framework. Like, Solo had a little flex room as far as like bringing that classical style to it. I don't see that ever working for Guardians. Like,
Neither do
you
I.
need that kind of brash, energy that it has, and I don't know if someone like Ron Howard, who's a fantastic filmmaker, by the way, I think I don't think that's a fit. I think we saw with Solo, like, he was great at set pieces, but part of that movie was that I think that the energy was off on it just a little bit, probably because it was a mixture of different filmmakers, which is never great. Rarely does that work, but I also think that there was like a disconnect that I felt just between, like, is this a young, brash, new Star Wars, or is this the old classical space, like grandiose space opera Star Wars? And I never really got a sense of that. And I don't see that working for a Guardians movie.
I would agree. I think it's a thankless position, but what do you think?
I think it's funny because it's like, especially with Marvel, more than any other franchise, I feel like there's so much revisionist history as it goes on. And it's like, I feel like a lot of people are like, James Gunn or nothing. It's like, a lot of people, I think the second one's better than the first. I know I'm in the major minority, but a lot of people walked away a little disappointed from that second Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think one of the key pieces that may have been missing was Nicole Perlman, who helped write the first one. She's directed. I think she even wrote Captain Marvel too. So it's like, give her a shot. It's not going to feel that different, especially if she had a big hand in the first one. Maybe some of those ingredients that were missing in the second one would be there under her. But I think Taika seems like a lateral move, and that's why everyone was like, "Oh, Taika, we know what we're going to get." But I'd say you would be in almost the same hands with Nicole. I'd have her give a shot if she wants it.
What has she directed? I don't know. I'm not
She
familiar.
directed, I don't know if it's a short film. She directed some film. I looked it up, her IMDb. She's mostly a writer. She did direct a film. I can't remember what it was called now. I apologize. But I think she did write Captain Marvel too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I like that pitch. Taika did talk about The Mandalorian. First of all, can we just take a moment to say how awesome What We Do in the Shadows is? That's it.
It's fantastic.
It's a great movie.
Yes, it is.
So he did talk about The Mandalorian and the tone of it, and he said Star Wars is a very, very different to the Marvel style. They know that the tone of the first films really should be kind of adhered to. That, speaking of Solo, that's what the fans like, and you can't really disrespect it, I guess, is a nicer way of saying you can't put too many jokes in. There's a bit. Definitely my tone is in there. The dialogue and stuff like that.
That was like the most backhanded way of being like,
It's
yeah, they didn't really let me
boring.
do my Taika thing on this. So, because you guys want your Star Wars to be a certain way. So if you're like, why are my jokes aren't there? That's why, guys.
Right.
That's what I felt like it was.
Which is the baseline assumption about what happened with Solo, which I presumed that Miller and Lord came in and do what they do, and were making a film that was kind of reflecting on and turning a thing on its head. And then Kathleen Kennedy and team went, you can't do that to Star Wars. It has to feel like Star Wars. How much longer do we think that that's going to remain true? Marvel also has a tone. It does.
Well, yeah, Marvel has a tone.
There's a little more variance, though, currently.
I don't know what to do with Star Wars anymore. Because what is the tone? What is the tone that will make Star Wars fans happy? There isn't one.
Nothing.
We're at a point with Star Wars where it's been fractured so many different ways. It started with the prequels versus the originals, and it's splintered off now into I like this movie and I didn't like this movie, or I like this thing and you didn't like this. Like when with the new trilogy, there's another fracture, and now it's fractured 17 different ways since then. Like, there's no one thing that is going to make Star Wars fans happy. And that kind of, to me, makes me a little a little hesitant about The Mandalorian, because like now, if it's in their head, like, okay, we have to deliver the thing that Star Wars fans want. Mm-hmm. Like that's where you go really, really wrong, is like not somebody saying like, hey, I've got a great idea and I think the fans are going to love it. That's different. Saying like, we have to consciously write and produce something that we think will please the Star Wars fan. Like there's no people, number one, people can sniff that out a mile away, and it usually leads to some kind of creative compromise. And number two, there is no one thing anymore that is going to please any fandom.
No, yeah.
Ever. It's not how it works anymore, because the way that social media and everything works is there's no consensus voice anymore to anything. Like it used to be, Star Wars fans liked Return of the Jedi, and there was a slice of that fandom that didn't like it. But the consensus was that fans generally liked Return of the Jedi. Not anymore. It's just all of the voices talking at once simultaneously. So to think like, oh, we're going to do this thing that's going to please the Star Wars. No, I think they should make, and hopefully that's what they're doing, the best show that they think they can make, and not, we're going to make the show that has the tone that we think will please Star Wars fans, because then that's just compromise and it gets watered down. And by the way, you're still not going to achieve that objective.
Yeah. Okay. So Dan, when you were describing all of the voices speaking at once, I don't have the quote, so you'll have to help me, but it's, and suddenly there were a million voices.
It's as if thousands of voices cried
right
out in
at
terror,
once.
Yeah.
and were suddenly silenced.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The suddenly silenced part probably won't ever happen, but which
Not
is
for Star
fine.
Wars.
It's. I agree with you. That we've talked about this before. Star Wars does feel like a no-win situation.
I think you and I have talked about this and stuff. I've come to a point where it's just like everyone talking about Star Wars is white noise. I have found my own love of Star Wars and can live in my bubble of Star Wars, and I don't need to hear the chatter around it. So it's like, all right, if this is the way it's going to go, I'm going to watch it. Like I watch everything Star Wars. Some of it's for me, some of it's not. But yeah, the fracturing, I can't defend Star Wars anymore. I can't argue. It's to a point where I don't want to talk about it anymore unless I'm talking. I love talking with Ken Knapsack about Star Wars, because it's just like, we don't have to talk about like, is this good, is this bad? It's like, let's actually just talk about Star Wars like nerds are supposed to.
Nerds are supposed to. Let's behave like
Talk
we're
about whose
supposed to,
lightsaber is
nerd.
more red because they have stronger kyber crystals.
Yeah,
not,
let's
like,
talk
is
about
Kathleen Kennedy ruining my life?
Let's talk about the inception of the lightsaber in total. Like, nerds are supposed to. Back in my day, nerds stay focused on the things they were supposed to, the minutia.
Well, the difference being also there was no explanation for the
kidding.
minutia. Back in the old days, there was no, like, I remember when I was a kid, we used to just make up the story of Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi fighting in a volcano because we knew that it happened, but we hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
We didn't know where, we didn't know how, so it was like, let's make it up. Let's talk about it. Let's think about, like, how would that fight have gone? Why were they fighting? But now, because you have to expand the lore and everything, and there are no mysteries anymore, then the conversation becomes about, I hated it and I liked it, because there's no other conversation to have, because they explain everything. The mystery is gone. Everything has to be explained through 17 different novels and books and TV shows and movies and prequels, and there is no mystery behind these franchises anymore. We're getting young Spock again on Star Trek Discovery. So if there was any mystery left for what happened to Spock, well, here's another show about it. You don't get to sit around and talk about, like, what did Spock do when he was a kid? Here it is.
Yeah.
Now you know.
Well, and I think that's why the conversation has shifted, because I think one of the fun things about speculation for me about any given franchise, is you do get to make up those stories for yourself. You get to decide in your own mind what happened, and nobody can ever satisfy that, really. It's why adaptations are tough, because you've already seen it play out in your mind. No one's going to exactly match what you had in your mind unless you made it,
Yeah.
So that's why I think you can't satisfy anyone. But the interesting thing about Star Wars is, like, dinner conversation now, we were talking about this, is like certain topics, like Last Jedi comes up and it's like, I don't know, what's your religion? Like, you're just like, Republican, Democrat, where are we at? Like, you just moved, what used to be every taboo subject, is now usurped by entertainment, which is crazy.
But even now with the Mandalorian, like, this is not a commentary on the series itself, but like, Boba Fett was like this speck in space. And Boba Fett could fly anywhere because all you knew about Boba Fett was that he was a bounty hunter with armor. So that's it. That's the constraint on Boba Fett. He's a bounty hunter with the armor, and he fell into the Sarlacc pit at the end of the Jedi. And then the prequels sort of take that speck and they draw a circle around it, and they're like, okay, well, but here are the constraints. He came from here, and his armor came from here, and this is where and he was a clone, and okay. And now the Mandalorian, it feels like, is going to go into that circle and draw a square and be like, and here's Mandalorian. So now Boba Fett, instead of being able to fly into space wherever he wants, is now okay, but you have to stay inside this box, which is inside this circle. And all of a sudden now it's like, well, okay, now your Boba Fett story has to fit these very particular parameters because we've now closed in the amount of space that you can do with Boba Fett. And like, that's what I don't like about when franchises keep returning to the same well, is they're taking these things that had limitless possibility and drawing circles and squares and boxes around and saying like, well, actually, here's the constraints around where you can go with this character in this story. And I think you lose something as you go on. Which is why I think you need to start creating more new things that people can have limitless imaginations and possibility about. That was the great thing about Lost.
Yeah.
The less you knew, the better the discussion was, because everyone was speculating about fan theories. And then when they started answering questions, then the conversation stopped being speculation and started being like, I like it, I don't like it.
Well, there's plenty of, the secondary problem though was it's weird. It's a tough line because there's opening up a thread and then literally never answering that thread, which is also disappointing. Setting up this thing as having this huge significance, and then at the end of the day, just going, well, we're not going to address that particular thing, which I think a lot of Lost fans complain that a little bit of that was done with certain storylines.
It's not easy. It takes care and attention and luck to actually get it right, and time, and that's why there's so few franchises that have persisted for this long, because you're right, it's a difficult balance between how do I tell a satisfying story, how do I set up these cool things that people can kind of riff on. It's not easy. Very few people can do it.
It's definitely not easy. I have my own theory about Lost, but do you want to know?
Lots of theories on Lost.
My theory is pretty simple, which is that J.J. Abrams set it up with one arc in mind that probably should have lasted a season, and then it got insanely popular. And they had to deal with that.
I think
that
the
was
ending.
hard.
I think the ending was guessed by the internet.
It was,
season
and
one, and they had to just go
shit. But they eventually, in a very surreptitious way, worked their way back to a very similar ending to what it probably always was, which is they were in purgatory.
They were not in purgatory. Everything that happened on the island happened on the island, Roth.
No, Billy, hang on. Don't. What she's. I think what. We know that they weren't actually in purgatory, but I think that was the original ending, and they had to sort of like squiff around it a little bit.
I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but
when he started the show, one day the vault of J.J. Abrams' ideas.
Bad Robot's not that far. Let's just go storm their office.
Let's
and hold
do
them
it,
hostage
man.
and
Let's
get
do
the
it.
answers.
Yeah, let's get our answers.
It's been 11
It's been
years.
11 years.
Airheads.
Yeah. Look. All I'm saying is I truly believe, and he's a guy that does that. He sets things up and he's like, I don't know, you'll figure it out. Bye, I've got another project now. But like in Star Wars. And then he comes back. I truly believe that the original conceit of that show, and it can be found in the text, was that they were
in the holy text.
In the text of Lost, they were reconciling themselves. They were reconciling, and it should have lasted. It would have been an amazing one season of television on Netflix that then would have become a different anthology in a different time, but it wasn't a different time. So it actually is a fascinating look at the evolution of television. Lost changed the way we do television. It absolutely did.
It was 6 magical seasons.
I loved it. I covered Lost. That's one of the first internets I did. I did that.
The
internets.
Peaks and valleys for me on that show. High highs, low lows.
Yeah.
I think season 3 was like, I was like, oh boy, where are we going here?
Before they introduced that they got back from the they were floundering. Like they were barely staying afloat. Like that was great. When they did the whole thing where they were back, and then that was great. It was a good 2 seasons, and then I feel like at the end, they were like, okay, here's our original endpoint, but
How do we
the
get
internet
there?
happened in between, and
Yeah.
let's figure out a way to get there. And I don't mind the finale, but I also think it's a little bit like they had set up so many. It's sort of like the speck in the. They drawn so many circles and boxes around the
Yeah.
ending of their thing. They're like, well, we keep pinging off the walls, so we're just
Yeah.
gonna have to do the best we can
Yeah,
given
yeah.
what we've folded into the show over the years.
Yeah, I agree. And they said that was the original ending that they had in mind, and I believe that, but tweaked to match what they had done over the years, which was that they had to now act as if the island really was real the whole time, because that's where the show ended up taking them. But if you look at that first season, if you look at things like there's a polar bear, but it's also in his comic, that's because that's what's in his brain, and he's reconciling. In any event, weird one today. I like
Yeah.
our show today. Let's talk about Chris Pratt. Why not? It's in my script. He's mad at Star Wars. Star Wars.
He's
Oh,
fine
God.
with Star Wars.
He's
far
fine with
as we
Star
know.
Wars.
He's
As
fine
far
with
as
Star
we know.
Wars.
Star Lord.
New headline: Chris Pratt hates Last Jedi.
No.
Re-promoted on social. He's also mad at Star Lord. This is via Screen Rant. So obviously a lot of people, and I guess spoilers for Infinity War. I mean, you've all seen it. So he received a lot of backlash from fans after his meltdown.
His character's meltdown.
I hate this so much. This makes me so GD angry. This the fact that he had to come out and be like, guys, no, I'm mad at Star-Lord too. No, Chris Pratt, you do not give in to the lowest common denominator. That's like if people were like, I can't believe Romeo killed himself and Juliet wasn't dead yet. It's like, then there's no story. How bummed would you have been if they had pulled the glove off of Thanos and that's it? Like, put him in cuffs, take him away. Like, what a lame ass movie Infinity War would have been, you morons. Of course it was supposed to happen that way.
I also think that they've very much established in the last Guardians of the Galaxy movie that he is a very emotional person who has trouble with his impulse control.
Yeah.
He did the same thing to Kurt Russell, when
Yeah.
he's just like, spoilers, when Kurt Russell's like, yeah, I killed your mom. Like, he literally broke like a star curse or whatever was in his head and then fought him to Fleetwood Mac. Like, he's an emotional guy. Like, this is what he does.
Star-Lord breaking that star curse
You
in
know
the
what?
planet's
I know
head.
you guys hate it when I do this, but like I see that a lot, not just like with this, but like with wrestling. People are like, I hate that wrestler. Get him off my TV. I'm like, he's a bad guy. You're supposed to hate him. This is what they want.
I don't
Why
hate
are
the
you all so
wrestling
dumb?
analogies. I don't hate the wrestling analogies.
It's I forgot Spencer's not here. Spencer's the one that can't stand them. But I feel like this is now a new thing where people are, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying about having stories in your head. People now get so mad when the stories don't go how they think it should go in their head that they like act out like toddlers.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. The fact that Chris Pratt even said like, no, I get it. Don't worry. I'm upset with this fictional character that I play too, but don't worry, it'll pan out. It's like, you morons. That's what drama is. That's what tragedies are. Idiots.
well,
No, idiots.
no, I don't think idiots. However,
I do.
However, I will say this in terms of dramatic tension, and you look at as far back as the Greeks, there's always that like tragic decision or that kind of poetic irony that takes place in which Oedipus, there is this prophecy and his own actions bring it to fruition. And I think that's just as far back as storytelling goes, and we see that we are, and it's true to life. We are our own worst enemies. We are doomed by our own bad habits, And I'm rewatching Game of Thrones right now, and in my mind, I'm just watching it listing every bad decision that a character makes. Like I just rewatched the Viper fight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a great show because in that moment where he turns to kind of brag and smile, he signs his own death warrant with his arrogance. And you just die inside because you wish he would make the better choice. But frankly, when you think about the choices you've made in your own life, how many times have you doomed yourself to a path that you would rather not be on because you just acted out of your own best interest? I'm not talking about me specifically.
I feel,
but I also am.
I feel partially responsible for just because Honest Trailers was sort of part of the way back when it started, before I was even here, like part of the movie thing of just like pointing things out about movies. And I feel like it's a monster that's gotten away from us a little bit, because people will point to things like, why didn't the Viper just kill the Mountain? Or like, why did Star-Lord, get so angry? And they'll be like, that's such a terrible plot hole. It's like, that's not a plot hole.
That's
like,
human behavior.
A plot hole is like things that there's no explanation for inside of a movie. And by the way, not all plot holes, like most movies have plot holes in the sense that, like, yes, if this character had done this one thing, the movie would have been over in 10 minutes, but it would have been a really boring movie. Egregious plot holes are the ones that are just like the movie relies on characters to be stupid in situations where they shouldn't be stupid, or, like the rom-com thing where, like, if these two characters just talk to each other, then, well, yeah, but then the movie would be over in 10 minutes. It's still a little more frustrating. But I hate the idea when somebody, a flaw like the Viper's pride, or, Star-Lord being impulsive and rash and saying, like, that's such a plot hole. Like, it's not. It's a character showing weakness. It's a character exhibiting a very fatal flaw that has terrible consequences. And you're right. If he hadn't done that, then they would have won. But, like, that's tragedy. Like you were saying, like, that's weakness. That's human error. Like, there's a difference between that and, like, an actual plot hole where the script just conveniently has characters forget something that they should know. Like, it can be a subtle difference, but I feel like the point was, like, when we're doing honest trailers, our point is not to just be like, point out everything terrible, or, point out anything that doesn't make sense. Like, you also have to contextualize it within a film.
But I would argue that these things do make sense, because human beings, to the point that we're making here, do behave this way.
Yeah.
We all have fatal flaws. We all do things that later we regret. We act out of anger. We act out of pride. We act out of whatever emotional place that we're acting out of that isn't ultimately in the best interest of the situation or ourselves. That's not a plot hole. A plot hole to me, and there's two things. There's when they use characters and characters betray their own integrity, meaning not integrity as in literal integrity, but who they've been crafted to be to drive a plot forward. Meaning, if a character is erratically acting differently with no seeming logic, scene to scene to scene, just to drive the plot forward, that's frustrating.
Bad writing.
That's bad writing.
Prometheus.
But yeah, well, a lot of films, and a plot hole is really an event in which there's like a deus machina, a thing that is truly there just to solve a situation that is otherwise actually unsolvable. Like, these character traits and flaws are not plot holes. Like, you turn to the left, it's comedy, turn to the right, it's tragedy, but it's all the same thing. We act insane as people. We are the least rational species. The idea that we are the most rational species is a lie we've been telling ourselves. Good talk on Star-Lord, though.
Yeah.
Don't
We never
apologize
actually said
for
what
it.
he said, by the way. We set up that he said something.
Oh
and
yeah,
we
we
didn't
never
actually
did.
ever
Let's
say
play
what
that.
his
So
quote
he was doing. Thank you. He was doing an interview with Digital Spy promoting the Lego Movie 2, the second part, and he said he agrees with the majority of people blaming Star-Lord with regard to the Avengers' failure to stop Thanos. He said he's not worried about his character's reputation taking a massive hit in the following his mistakes. He knows how things are going to play out in Endgame. So he says, I think it's totally true, and I personally feel the same as everyone else about Star-Lord, but I know things, okay? And I feel like audiences are going to get blown away when this next film comes out. And then he asked about the future, and he said, even if it's not, it's worth it, because this is an experience for fans that truly never will be matched again in the history of cinema. Agreed.
I just hate that he has to, like, defend his character's choice. That's so dumb. We deserve nothing.
But it's like that feeling you have about the Starks, the frustration with the decisions that they made that ultimately led to things that harmed them. That feeling is the feeling that tragedy is supposed to evoke.
Sure. Look, I'm not mad at Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at Chris Pratt. I'm mad because I've been on Twitter and I've seen these people, like, burning their Guardians of the Galaxy Blu-rays because they're like, never again, Star-Lord. And I'm just like, you guys, okay. Anyways.
But I think my takeaway from this
Sure.
is that level of investment in the created and imagined world is how you're supposed to feel.
Not that
To a
level.
point.
To a point.
To a point.
To a
To a
There is a
point.
point at which it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
this is
not
not
real.
healthy.
Yeah, but it's also like in a horror movie, don't go into the basement. Like you love watching a horror movie because you think you would make better choices, but probably you wouldn't.
Probably not.
More
Like,
than
probably
likely they
you
would
would
not.
not. You would
More
make
than
the
likely they
same
would
dumb
not.
choices and be dead.
Yeah.
Lauren Schuler Donner hopes that New Mutants isn't Hulu bound.
Oh boy.
And we're back to TCAs.
And now we get back to TCAs. This is via Deadline. And it's kind of an interesting accidental slam to Hulu. So this is at the TCAs where FX announced this would be the last season of Legion. Laura, which I respect. Laura Schuler Donner opened up about the X-Men universe going over to Disney. And she asked if she would still have a hand in the X-Men related property. She said, I don't know. I don't think so. Certainly in name credit, it's up to Kevin Feige. I don't know what Kevin is thinking. I think he's still dealing with the wealth of characters and trying to make sense of it all. That's fair. And she said, you can't have too many Marvel X-Men super movies out there. We'll cancel each other out. Each one has to be distinctive. You have the Avengers to follow through. There's so many distinctive canons to follow through, and you have the new ones to focus on. For us, it's a lot of people. It's a lot, and people will get sick of them. We have to be careful. Kevin Feige, has to be careful. You can't have more than 4 franchises out there. And then
That's a weird number.
Yeah, that's an interesting number. So in regards to the New Mutants potentially heading to Hulu, she said she oversaw that protection. She said she's hopeful that the teen horror pick will get a theatrical release and not go to Hulu. She said they worked hard on it. I want to see it released theatrically. I'd hate to see it thrown at Hulu.
Ooh.
Burn to Hulu.
I'm taking the theme of this TCAs was we don't like you streaming people.
I mean, Lauren Schuler, she's part of Hollywood royalty.
Sure,
and
definitely.
I think that there are people that do see being sold to a streaming service, and honestly, not pictures that were made like with Netflix distribution in mind, but movies that were made and subsequently sold to particularly Netflix, Cloverfield Paradox being one of them. I think one of the biggest examples. They're not very good a lot of the times, and the general consensus is that they were sold to these streaming services because they weren't very good. I think there is a stigma. Not movies like Roma and Ballad of Buster Scruggs or even Bright, which are produced with the intention up front that they are going to be on Netflix. I mean movies that are made to be in theaters and that are then subsequently sold to Netflix are either number 1, not very good, Cloverfield Paradox, or number 2, determined like Annihilation internationally to be not financially viable. And so they just want to recoup their investment. And I think there's a stigma attached to both. So for me, it's not so much her saying, oh, Hulu sucks. It's that, I think I'm sure she's seen several versions of the movie, and maybe she's saying like, I think this deserves a theatrical release, and I'd hate for it to be given the stigma of not being good enough to be released in theaters. That's how I read it.
I think that's probably true, and I think filmmakers want their films to be seen in the format that it was intended. Also, it does seem like a little slam to Hulu, though. Thoughts?
I mean, it's just a little bit like, I don't want to see it thrown to Hulu, the dogs. I mean, look, I'm not gonna lie to you. It'd be a tough sell if this New Mutants got delayed, like 3 times now, and then it's like, and it's coming exclusively to streaming. I'm like, dog shit. That's what that means.
But you'd watch it on Hulu.
Probably, but that's more of a me problem. That's more of my taste being more of the dog poo kind.
See, that's what I mean, though. That's the stigma.
But
that's
is.
exactly what people are going to think. Oh, that's crap, and I'm not going to watch it. And
exactly.
maybe she's saying, like, I think that it deserves better, is really what she's saying.
I think people are more likely to watch this movie because it's got a little stink on it, and maybe it's not good. Cloverfield Paradox was not good.
I agree. Maybe it's not good. I just mean, I'm saying that maybe she's seen it, and it's more not me saying the movie's good. It's me saying, like, I don't read it so much as a slam on Hulu as perhaps her saying that, like, I think that they worked really hard on it and it's good, and I would like to see it released theatrically.
But I think that's where the problem's going to be. We talk about, like, what will be the first big IP franchise movie exclusive to streaming. And I think until this mindset gets changed, or somebody's just like, screw it, we will be the first to really roll the dice on this. I'm talking to Star Wars, I'm talking to Marvel, I'm talking like one of your big flagship ones. Like, that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Like, and I feel like that's what their mentality is. It's like streaming is immediately lower tier quality. And I'm not saying that they're wrong, because so far that's why I was like, when I heard Mowgli was going on stream, I'm like, oh, that must mean it's bad. Like, that's just what they've rolled out so far. So it's going to be tough to change that.
They're not gonna put a movie that they think is gonna make $100 million on a streaming
No, they're
platform,
not.
because the money's not there, because most streaming platforms aren't gonna pay $100 million post it being made.
Yeah.
But
to put it on the
imagine
service.
if Disney Plus's numbers, they're good. This is all hypothetical. Imagine they come out and they're good, but they're a little short of what, they had promised investors or whatnot. And what's the one thing that could really push them over? What if the next Star Wars movie that maybe is not one of the Skywalker ones, but they were talking about like one of what's his name, Rian Johnson's trilogy? What if it's like, okay, what if we put that on streaming just to push it over the edge? I could see a situation like that happening.
Yeah, I mean, it gets tricky because is it on streaming only? Is it day and date? The theater chains are not open to day and date. It just gets really, really complicated quickly. But I think you're right. The longer and the more frequently they take movies that they're dumping. And I think, Dan, you're right. The distinction needs to be it wasn't originally created for this purpose, because Roma's nominated for an Academy Award. Nobody's saying that's not a great movie.
Right.
Well, I'm sure there are. But far be it from me. But that said, if New Mutants isn't good, if it is a mess, and if Disney looks at it and says, we're just going to put it on Hulu, then that is sending a message about what they're putting on Hulu and why.
Although now if for example, if Disney specifically, I mean, this is specific to Hulu, but where's the financial incentive for them if they own most of Hulu?
Yeah.
And Hulu buys the movie from them. It's you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul at some point, right? It's like I mean, Disney would have to really think that this movie has no prospect of making any money, because even if they sold it to Hulu, like part of that profit would be coming out of their own pockets. So what's the upside?
So
Netflix is different.
If they think, okay, scenario B, they don't think it's bad the way Paramount thought that Cloverfield Paradox was bad, but they think it's okay, not on track. They don't think it's tracking to make all that much money in theaters. They don't think the audience interest is there. They think that it's setting up a false narrative for where the X-Men are actually going to go under Disney's ownership. Then they make it. Then they send it to Hulu, actually to boost Hulu. As a move that would do that versus dumping it. They're like, it's good enough to attract some new eyes to Hulu, and we are having the strategy of basically coming at Netflix on all sides. Let's send it to Hulu.
I'm sure that's got to still be cheaper distribution-wise than doing a theatrical
Definitely.
rollout. So maybe you just minimize your costs rather than try to make money off of it.
I just wonder what the tipping point is.
I don't know.
What is the number at which they're like, it makes more sense to do this?
Yeah.
Versus we're gonna give it a go. And
I mean, the interesting thing with productions in general is like there is a certain point down the line where even if they know like this is shaping up to be a disaster, they just have to finish it and dump it, because it's more costly at that point to shelve it in
Right.
any given regard. How do we want to end this? On what kind of note?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we've hit all the notes this show.
Yeah, this has been a notey show.
Very notey.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to send you to TCAs for something.
I think
just so you can
so.
experience it.
Yeah.
The no clapping thing is the weirdest thing.
Is
for
that
me.
weird?
Because like even when they walk out,
No.
Yeah, you're not
it's
allowed.
Very
so like
It's
they're like,
strange.
ladies and gentlemen, J.J. Abrams, and it's just silence.
And you go,
I mean, they don't do it like Barnum and Bailey.
Yeah.
They're like, and the showrunner, J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
Like, it's very...
yeah.
But that's bizarre.
It's very...
Like it's not
super-
endorsement. Like
Yeah.
clapping is just like I'm in an audience and it's weird if we all said hello simultaneously. So this is just saying hello, how are
Yeah.
you? Like that's
No,
weird.
not allowed. I
But
think
they
it's weird,
allowed
too.
swag bags.
They do.
That's so dumb. Like you can't have it both ways.
I don't make
if the
the
TCAs
rules.
were really that much
I don't make the rules.
about integrity, then they would allow either clapping and swag bags or no clapping and no swag bags.
Other rules. Okay, other rules include. I don't make the rules, but I was in the TCAs and I had to adhere to them, and I thought it was weird not to clap too because it just feels kind of rude.
Yeah.
You know, just like. But the problem too is that they were also the other concern was that say J.J. Abrams comes out and you really like J.J. Abrams, like yay, and then another show comes out that is not critically beloved, and you're just like. That also sets a weird tone so that you need a neutral tone across to create. But other rules include, so they have these parties, they have these events every night. There's like a different network sponsors an event and a big party, and you are not allowed to do selfies. You can't, people do them anyway, but you can't like tweet pictures from the event of like, here I am with the stars. Like the whole idea, I thought you'd like that one. Because the whole idea is that we are actual critics and it is our job to vigorously investigate whether there's this, not everybody behaves this way.
I was going to say, I don't know what parties you went to, but.
This is the thesis. This is not the reality. The thesis is it's our job to remain neutral and to criticize the show on its merits or not, and to take the network to task if need be. And we're not going to do anything to curry favor with one or the other.
It's very backwards.
It's
because
very like
again, the swag bags make no sense.
All
in that
this is
context.
happening at like the NBC Universal party.
Yeah.
And it's like
and
watch
it's like,
Heroes. And you're
there's
all right.
there's like mountains of just drinks and food, and so it is. There's a dissonance, and but I liked the presence.
Also, if you're with an outlet that has a
They
room,
brought puppies for the puppy bowl.
if you get a star towards the end of the day, they're either going to be a dick, which happens, but it's fun when they get slap happy and they just want to just like goof around. That's when you get some fun stuff.
Yeah. It's a really, really interesting, strange, insular world, the Television Critics Association, which, again, being very old school, only accepts print from its members, and as such, I am no longer a member.
I've dipped my toe in the publicity route circuit before, just like doing a few junkets here and there, and it's an interesting
weird.
vibe. Like I felt lucky to be there. I was just kind of like, the kid that won a contest or something, got to talk to Star Trek people. But I definitely saw a couple of people pull a "Don't you know who I am?"s after being asked to wait like 10 minutes. They're just like, "Do you not know who I am?" But like I didn't.
Yeah.
And they were like,
but why would you?
But no, but I know people, but like this was not a person that you would think would pull a "Don't you know who I am?" because it was like not even a local news anchor. It was like it's a weird thing. It's just like, do you not understand that I've been doing this for so long? And I'm just like, okay, but like everyone else is waiting. Like, well, it's cool. Like I know people that do bigger things that are just cool with waiting. Like not to be arrogant, but I would just like knowing where he was from and knowing where I was from. I was like, what I tape here today is probably going to get more viewers than what you tape here today. But it's like, we all seem cool with waiting, but there seems to be like a subset that have like done it for years that are just like, do you not understand that I've been doing junkets for 35 years? And it's just like, okay, but like, you can hang out with everybody else and wait. It's not a big deal, right?
After the show, you're going to tell me who this is.
I don't know. The thing was, I didn't know who he was, which is why I was at first put off by him saying, "Don't you know who I am?" Because generally, you would think that somebody who says, "Don't you know who I am?"
Did they literally say that phrase?
It was either literally that phrase or
Close
some
enough.
variation of like, you must be new here, or like one of those things that was just
Rude.
like you should definitely know who I am, and the audacity to make me wait for 5 minutes in the hallway.
Yeah.
Like, you need to know better.
You know what's really
But it was
interesting?
nobody that anybody watching would know.
But it's never anybody. But even if it was like, I don't know if you've ever heard anyone actually use that phrase. It is the most ridiculous phrase that anyone could ever use, because in the circumstances you are inevitably in, either the person A, doesn't know, or B, doesn't care. It's clearly irrelevant, because either way, the circumstance that you're in, you must be treated like you need to wait, because for whatever reasons you need to wait, you know? But I have literally heard someone from the internets on a number of occasions use that actual phrase, and it always blows my mind because, like, clearly not. I mean, my brother barely knows who I am.
It's the ultimate rhetorical question.
It's just like, why would anybody? Why should that alter? What level of privilege are any of us entitled to? None. We're living the privilege in that moment. We get to go and do a junket. We get to go and do this for a living. That's the privilege. You don't deserve anything above and beyond that. Be a freaking human. Don't be rude. The PR reps are working hard too.
Yeah, and
I don't know where those
I know who you are, Roth Cornet.
No one knows who I am, and no one gives a shit. Truly. Like,
That's not
but
true.
why would they? No, but why would they? I am lucky to exist in this world. No one knows who I am. No one cares. That's
not
fine.
true.
That's absolutely true. And
there are people out there who like you a lot.
well,
More people know who you are than a lot of
Dad.
other people.
Caleb's listening.
Caleb's
Yeah.
listening. I love you too, honey. So that's the cat. I think enjoys my presence sometimes, sometimes not. Anyway, the point is, I'm with you. It's always so weird to see that
To
happen.
see somebody like big timing.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I count myself very lucky too, and like it's not fun like sitting around because those junkets are always running behind, and you think you're gonna be there for 2 hours, and you're there
It's
for 4. And I've
6.
done like 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
Not that many. I'm sure there are even worse stories, but at the same time, it's like, oh, let me play my violin. I have to sit in a hallway and wait to talk to a movie star.
Yeah.
My life
Fart
is so
in front of
hard.
them.
And then
If
fart
you're-
in front of them
if
if you're
you're
Billy the Business.
Very unlucky.
Yeah.
It was a rough day. I mean, those
Try not
lunches
to
are
be
good, man,
flatulent.
but
They're
heavy.
They're heavy. They can make you a little gassy.
Yeah.
I think the funny thing about that too is like, if you really have to go because you have like a plane to catch, then there's a conversation or whatever. Some of those people do because they
Right.
are traveling.
Or if you have a deadline or something, there's a
yeah.
way to go about it. It's like, hey, listen, I'm really sorry, but I have
Yeah.
a 4:00 deadline and it's
Could you
2:30. Like,
please-
could there not? Let's just like, do you not understand who I am and how long I've been waiting here? Like, I've been doing. It's just like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like,
There's a way to have
my
that
point
conversation.
being, like, there is a whole subculture around the publicity thing
Yeah.
that like I've seen this much of that is very
it's very strange.
It's
interesting and
weird.
weird.
I used to have beef with the ET Canada guy.
Oh, talk to me.
Because when I worked at TV Guide, it was always like all the big networks and then ET Canada and us. And we always got one little section because they put down a piece of like 8.5 by 11 paper.
Yes.
And you have to stand there
Like
like
cattle.
this. And so we were both trying to get Ryan Reynolds on a press line for
Sure.
Green Lantern. And it was as if it was the Hunger Games.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the end.
But it is the Hunger
It is because it's like,
Games.
I'm going to get this shot,
Yeah.
Mr. Canuck, whether or not your head's in the frame or not.
Yeah.
So I was like contorted, like Cirque du Soleil, trying
Yeah.
to get, it was weird.
But she just like it like you have to bring home whatever you have to bring home to your outlet. That's true. We're talking about press lines now, and those are crazy because you really are. You're like sandwiched in this big, and it's just like, hey. But there was this one lady who worked for an outlet, which I will not name, but it's a big trade, and she was vicious, man. She fully knocked me over
It
to
happens.
get to. I was like, damn. Oh, violent.
We did a Paramount. I think you can still find it online. We did a Paramount press line a few years ago at Comic-Con, and they're like, "Come do the press line." Like Megan Fox is going to be there, and Michael Bay and Mark Wahlberg. I think they're doing a Transformers movie. Are going to be there, and like, cool. And we got there, and there's like, it was in this huge ballroom, and like, you know, like those things are massive. And so the press line started. We were literally the last person there, and you're right. It was like an 8.5 by 11, and it had handwritten on it, ScreenJunkies.
And you're just.
And by the time people got to us, like, we did not even see Michael Bay or Mark Wahlberg because,
Yeah.
like, Entertainment Tonight and Access Hollywood, they were all down at that end. And,
Yeah.
like, by the end, we got, and God bless them because they were, like, the nicest people. We got, like, Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob
Aw.
SquarePants, who was, like, the best interview ever. And then it's great because we're interviewing Clark Duke, and I think it's Hal doing the interview. And like I
Hey.
kind of nudged him, and I was just like kind of pointed that way. And Hal is so good at doing that stuff. He's like, he took the cue and he's like, "Hang on, Clark, let's turn around and see the rest of the room." And it's literally Hal interviewing Clark Duke alone in this ballroom, and you turn the camera and you just see this empty press line
Yeah.
going all the way down. Everyone's gone, the cameramen are gone, the anchors are gone, and Hal's just like, "Let it be known that Clark Duke stayed here in an empty ballroom and talked to every person on this." And he did. Like, we talked to every person, and he was literally the last person in this room. And, like, we didn't even see the people that they were like, "Oh, you're going to interview these people."
No.
Do you know who else, besides Clark Duke, will hit as many outlets as they can? Truly, is like a Tom Cruise. He really will try to like
Well,
hit
he-
as many as he actually, and then they cluster you at a certain point.
Yeah,
it's like
towards the end.
4 outlets per. You get one question from time, and then it really is the Hunger Games.
But that's
Like,
when ET Canada
'Cause then
guy
someone
and, I,
in the-
and we
it's
joined
like-
forces
yeah.
by the end.
Oh, nice.
to get what you needed.
Yeah, it was what was that one, Megamind with Will
Yeah.
Ferrell?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, come on, let's
You
just let's-
teamed up?
Yeah,
Yeah, because
good. That's
what you
like
have to do.
if they're like clustering you all, you're like, okay, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? Like, what's the question that we can ask that closely approximates what we all each need to walk away with? Because it might be very different things. But then you inevitably get that one asshole
that
who's
one
like,
person.
what's your favorite beer?
Yeah.
JJ, and you're like, I will murder you.
Well, that's us. That's us. We're the ones that are just like, hey, can you do the voice from the thing? You know, like it's a fun interview, but I'm sure. Well, there wasn't anyone behind us, so I guess it didn't matter because we were the last ones in line. But sometimes you can make friendships. Our friend Tony Revolori, we met on a
the
press line.
Well,
which was
he
nice.
already knew.
He knew like
the
ScreenJunkies,
channel,
but
yeah.
we connected. So sometimes lifelong friendships can be made.
Tony Revolori,
ET
Canada guy.
ET Canada guy. See, you can say, "Don't you know who I am?" or you can make a lifelong friend.
Yeah, it's
what you
your
can do.
choice. I think that's what
Yes,
we're walking away
exactly.
with. You know, you choose for you. Do you want to say, "Do you know who I am?" or do you want to say, "Hey, why can't we be friends?"
This is our longest show ever.
It's
and we've had
over
the
an hour.
We've had the fewest people on the panel.
Part of me wants to see how much we can tease it out. I will admit, in the back of my mind, like the 5 of you that are left, you're my favorite person.
You guys were screaming for that 90-minute SJU.
Yeah, here you go.
There it
You want a
was.
longer show? Be careful what you wish for.
And none of it. Next week, we'll dive into more background information about the ins and outs of the go-go world of journalisms. What do we call it? I think journalisms would be fine. Internet reportings, findings of.
See ya.
That's me saying goodbye, JT.